Please excuse the interruption while I share some important information about the Sunday Morning Coffee Podcast. If you would like to support the show, and believe me, I appreciate you supporting the show just by watching, there are a couple of ways that you can help out. You can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/smcpod. That's patreon.com/smcpod, where for just $4 a month, you can receive early access to episodes and subscriber-only content. If you prefer to make a one-time donation instead of a monthly donation, you can head over to buymeacoffee.com/smcpod. I'm not going to spell that one out, but it's spelled exactly as it sounds. buymeacoffee.com/smcpod, where you can make a one-time donation in any amount. Your support does not go unnoticed. Thank you for watching, thank you for your support, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's episode. I'm very happy to welcome Bob Ashley to the Sunday Morning Coffee Podcast. Bob, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So when I got the email from Karen about your book, I suddenly realized that I was interested in snake bites and anti-venom and stuff I didn't even realize that I was interested in. So first question, same question I ask everybody. Just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you ended up on the path that you're on today.
Bob Ashley. I've been into herpetology and reptiles my entire life, and whether it's part of a herp society, we helped to start NERBC, which is a large reptile show for a lot of people that sell reptiles. Started ECO. We published a lot of books on herpetology. We opened a desert museum here in Rodeo, New Mexico. We also have an Apache museum. We run scientific meetings as well. I do a little bit of everything. I dabble with some stuff in the pet industry as well with the food. But my love is out here in the desert. I'm from Michigan originally. I'm a desert rat now. Lived out here for about 15 years, and I bring people out on little tours every now and then look for rattlesnakes, and it's been fun to collect these snake oil bottles and reptile snakebite kits, things like that, along with books and everything else. So we've got a museum out here in the middle of nowhere for people to come out and see. We're right near where Geronimo surrendered. So another love of mine is the Apache history in the area. But that's kind of where I've evolved to and where I'm at now. We're actually just finishing a large 5,000 square foot library on herpetology that should be done and open here in the next 2 months, hopefully.
So you're in pretty much the perfect spot for your love of reptiles and the Apache history. It's pretty much where you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk about a little bit about your own personal love and interest for reptiles, reptilia, and so on. I'm assuming that started as a young man, maybe even a kid, or was that later?
I joined Boy Scouts because none of my family really was into animals that much. So I like to go camping and seeing snakes and things. So even I think my first animals were probably when I was about 8 or 9, and I was just collecting toads around our house. So I kind of evolved into snakes, and I got my first rattlesnake when I was 14. I didn't tell my mom that I had a rattlesnake in the house, but it was a small one, the Eastern Massasauga rattlesnake. So, that's kind of how I started, and I've just gotten more and more into it. So.
And when that interest was growing, is that when your interest in doing research and learning more about these various snakes and other reptiles came about?
Well, I always loved learning about these animals, and of course, I've been a big book collector since I was a little kid. So we have many thousands of books in herpetology. So I love reading. I love learning about new species, and I've been lucky enough to be able to travel all over the world to find these animals in the wild. Actually, I just got back from Australia a few days ago, and went with a couple of dear friends up the coast of where Queensland and New South Wales and South Australia all kind of come together. So we're kind of out western part of New South Wales, Cameron's Corner. So it's a really bizarre area. Got to see shingleback skinks and blue-tongued skinks and a couple of brown snakes, and even got to see a bilby in the wild, which was always an animal that I was always intrigued with. So, and in fact, John Cann was kind of the He is absolutely, because when I would go over and visit him, I met him about 25 years ago, and he had a great collection of snakebite kits that he was collecting, and of course he did Snakes Alive, and later we did historical snaky. So he's done a ton of research on the subject that I wrote on. So he knows way more than me on the subject. So he was gracious enough to let me use a lot of images and stuff he had. He donated a lot of his kits to us as well. In fact, at first I was collecting kits when I'd go over there, and I've been there 11 times now to Australia, and I would bring him kits for his collection. And after doing this for 4 or 5 years, I developed an interest in these things. And then I had the opportunity to buy other people's collections. So then over the next 10 years, I started buying people that had 20 or 30 or 40 kits, and I started getting them. So then later on, then John started giving me some of these kits back. So, well, no, I'm retiring now, and I got a lot of kits from him. But my interest in this really started with my friendship with John Can over in Australia, and he's really the godfather of the knowledge of all this stuff. It's pretty amazing what he knows.
How much of the library that you're putting together is from your own collection over the years?
I'd say about 80% of it. We just had a donation from a good friend of mine, Chuck Schaefer. They'll be adding to it a lot of Chelonian stuff. I've got other people that are also donating their libraries to us as well, like Walt Luce and Lori Vitt and so on. So there'll be a lot of books in there. There'll probably be around 7,000 books in there. But I'd say about 90% of 80 to 90% of it's books that I've been collecting. And some of the stuff, I bought an amazing collection of Venom books from Craig Adler. He had books that go all the way back to the 1600s. So stuff that he had been collecting his whole life. And I got books that were pretty much irreplaceable. Some just amazing stuff on the history of venoms and anti-venom and research and stuff. So that was, to me, that was just a great, amazing opportunity. We actually have an exhibit set up here at the museum where you can see these old books, all the kits, the snake oils I've been buying, and all these things on exhibit. So it's all right here at the museum. You can come and see everything in person.
That's really cool. So the books that date back, like you said, 1600 and moving forward, it must be incredibly interesting to look through those books and see what they thought about snakes and poisonous snakes and venom and all of that back then, and then obviously moving forward to now.
Oh, absolutely. You look, you go, of course, we started back with the Brooklyn Papyrus, which is ancient Egypt, which a lot of deities and praying and poultices and things. But when you get to like the 1600s, you're looking at where you're starting to get into some real science. And like the two authors back then, there was Charis and Reddy, and they both had different ideas of how people were envenomated. Charis felt that when he was actually bit by a snake, that the anger and passion from the snake would go into your body, and that's why you had this horrible reaction. So it was more of a almost an incantation of the snake. Whereas Reddy, an Italian, said, no, there's this saliva, this venom that's in there that's actually going in there, and you're having this. And each one of these authors came out with several books back then, which we've got several versions of all of them going back to the 1600s. And what ended up being, of course, Reddy was correct, and Charis was completely wrong. That there is science. This is not just an incantation of the snake or a passion of that viper that bites you.
Throughout history, dating back to the Bible, snakes are portrayed in a certain way. And the book that you mentioned, that it's the anger and the sort of plays into that. Obviously that has changed over time, and people still have phobias of snakes and so on, but I think popular sort of opinion has changed over the years. Where do you, going back into that book that you mentioned, is that kind of a little microcosm of the thoughts about snakes at that time?
Well, if you go back to the Egyptians, they would blame the snakes. Like if you got bit by a snake, basically the gods wanted you to get bit by that snake. So they had gods like Serket and Horus that they would pray to, or they would call upon to help remove these evil spirits and the stuff from you when you got bit by one of these snakes. So, and the kings and the royals used this kind of like they use religion to basically say, hey, you have to do this. If you get bit by the snake, this is because you did something against the king or against the gods, and you're being penalized. So that's kind of where a lot of this started. When it comes to trying to manage populations with snakebite. You know, it was really I think when the 1600s hit and they were starting to think, hey, this is actually a venom that's coming from the animal. You know, I don't think that was actually 100% understood. But really, until we got into the late or the mid to late 1800s, when you had a guy out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, called Henry Sewell, and he actually was doing experiments with pigeons and Massasauga rattlesnakes. And he was actually giving small injections of venom to these pigeons, and then giving larger injections later to see if they were develop some kind of an immunity to this venom, and it did. So that was really, you know, a lot. That was really when we started to really understanding how to treat these snake bites for the first time. And a famous guy, Calmetti, out of Europe, actually came and looked at this, and they were kind of doing research at the same time. And but Sewell was probably the first guy that we know of that actually was doing experimentation to figure out how to treat snake bite in a scientific way, not just by selling snake oil at a cart somewhere in the desert.
So yeah, so when at what point did the first anti-venom when was that produced? And yeah, so basically talk about that, and I'll follow up with that another question.
Well, Sewell was the first one to actually start to develop it. So they were doing experiments and things like that, you know. And then after that, we kind of got into where Wyeth came out with their anti-venom, or anti-venom. That's a French term that they don't use anymore. So Wyeth came out, and then we had Crofab, and they started using horse serum. They went back to sheep serum, and then they went to horse serum again. We've got Antivip that they're using now. So all this kind of evolved from what Sewell did in Calmetti, and it kind of moved through that. And that's kind of where we are today. Now there's another treatment that's not approved yet, but there's people working on a inhibitor that you can actually take an oral pill. So what's not going to eliminate what's going to be needed with as far as antivenom goes, but it can inhibit the effects of the venom for a period of time. So especially if you're someone in Sri Lanka that gets bit by Russell's viper, this may buy you 12 hours or 24 hours to get to a hospital to get actual anti-venom and actual treatment. So this is all brand new science, and it works best with neurotoxic property venoms, from what I've been hearing. But a lot of this is evolving right now, and it may be widely used here in the next couple of years.
So with the developments in anti-venom, you know, I think people sort of take for granted that, you know, that these anti-venoms exist, and don't even really think that they're still trying to improve them. They're still, you know, trying to come up with these inhibitors, as you said, which is incredibly interesting that work is continuing on.
They're still doing lots of science on this stuff, and it's an evolving thing, you know. And you know, there's still places in this country. We had a good friend of mine here, a herpetologist that was here for a conference, and he got bit by one of the snakes here on the property, and it's got some neurotoxic properties to it, and he had a pretty bad reaction to it. And we had it all set up with the toxicologist and the right people in Tucson, and they flew him out on a helicopter, and because of a large storm, because it was the monsoon season, they redirected him. They brought him to Deming in New Mexico. Well, Deming, New Mexico is third world compared to Tucson when it comes to snakebite treatment. They try to do fasciotomy, they try to all kinds of stuff, which luckily this gentleman had been bitten before and is actually a PhD and knew to refuse the treatment they tried to give him. And then when he finally said, well, I'm discharging myself, I'm leaving the hospital, they tried to give him antivenom when he was leaving the hospital, which is a no-no, because you could have an adverse reaction to the antivenom and go into anaphylaxis on your way out of there. And they, of course, didn't know that either. So luckily for him, he refused all the treatment and ended up being fine. It was a very small snake, and he ended up being fine. But somebody that doesn't know any better could have bad scarring, could lose a limb, all kinds of things, because people, even in our country, don't understand how to treat snake bite. The bigger cities do typically, but these small little towns, boy, you know, they're looking at these old merit badge, Boy Scout merit badge books and trying to figure out how to, you know, put butter on burns, I think sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with, obviously there's many different types of snakes, many different types of, you know, venom that have different effects on people, and I'm sure the size of the person and so on might have, you know, I don't know if that factors into it, but with the sheer amount of different species out there, it must be quite a, quite a lot of work and quite an ongoing amount of work to discover these species, what the venom does, etc., and then come up with, a treatment for it.
The nice thing about where we live in the United States is they have crowfab or antivep. They use all the venomous snakes here, other than the coral snake and the Gila monster. We have one anti-venom for all of them, so it works well. It's expensive. A lot of people don't realize that if you go to the hospital to get treated, the hospital's going to charge you about $2,500 a vial for this anti-venom, and you might need 60 to 90 vials of this.
Wow.
Not to mention a helicopter flight that can cost you upwards to $60,000, and then being in the hospital overnight. I mean, a typical bite, if you go to the hospital, you're there for a few days, it's going to be $250,000. So people don't
Wow.
realize you better have good insurance for that.
That's quite an expensive hike.
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get back. I'm very interested in the concept of, the snake oil salesman. That's a term that we use to this day, and I'm sure some people don't even know where that term came from, where it originated. So if you could talk a little bit about that. I'm assuming that the snake oil salesman predated the actual anti-venoms.
Absolutely.
So talk about a little bit about the history of that.
Underwood. So there's a guy in Australia named Underwood, and it was in 1844 that he had his own anti-venom, or not anti. I'm sorry, he had his own snake oil. Completely different thing than an anti-venom. So, and it was and a lot of these people all over the United States as well. It started right around the mid 1800s, and it kind of moved in. And they would have these carts. We're actually trying to find one of these old antique carts for the museum right now. So that's another thing I'm kind of searching for. But they would have these little things, whether it would take care of the whooping cough or rheumatism, and a lot of these things were cure-alls. A lot of them were made with mostly alcohol, and things like that, but all kinds of different oils and I mentioned a couple of the different things they used to use, but none of it was based in science at all. It was just a way to go around and try to make money. A lot of the stuff that's actually happening today at vitamin stores and these different claims that a lot of these sports people, I won't mention any names, I don't want to get sued, but there's a lot of these things out there that supposedly help with your libido and all these types of things. Well, they're snake oils as well. You pay your $29.95 to get something, and a lot of times it just might be caffeine or something else, or some other thing that's not approved by the FDA. But you don't need to be approved by the FDA for vitamins and some of these different like cure-alls,
right?
Which is pretty sad.
It is, yes.
But yeah, there's people doing this today, but there was a ton of people doing it, and it's been fun going out there and trying to collect the old ephemera and the old bottles and the oils and stuff that are still out there. And eBay's been a great source. There's a Snakebite collecting kit on Facebook as well, which is a good place to trade and barter and try to find some of these things. So once you kind of get the bug, you're like, oh, I want to find the other weird little eclectic snake oil bottle that someone was selling back in the day, so.
Now, was the original snake oil meant as a cure for snake bites, or was it just like you said, a cure-all, and it just got that name?
Snake oil was started before snake bite. I mean, when people were getting bit, but I think that there were so many more ailments, because snake bite's a pretty rare occurrence. So snake oil, I think the term for that came out not because they were selling these things for snake bite. They were using them for everything. They called it snake oil kind of like as a disparaging reference to the person selling the product. So snake oil, even though it has the word snake in it, I don't think it had anything to do with snake bite treatment.
Right.
Because they were selling all kinds of other ailments prior to that.
Right. And you see it in like every, Western movie. And
like the Wizard of Oz starts out with a guy who ended up being the great and powerful Oz that goes to, he was a snake oil salesman, so getting one of those old carts is one of the things I've been kind of looking for. There's a lot of replicas out there, but finding an old one, it's hard.
So when obviously science, evolves through the years and makes advances. So when science actually started to come out with things that could actually help you, there must have at that time been a skepticism about that, considering all the snake oil salesmen that were out there.
Well, back in the Wild West and stuff, and even in the East and stuff here in the States, they had the apothecary stores and stuff like that would sell aloes and balms, and they started to have things that actually did work and did work for different things, And I'm sure that all these places sold it or mixed in with other things that were like supposed to work, just like we have today. It's amazing that you can still go to a GNC store and buy all kinds of different things for different ailments that don't do anything at all. They still cost you $29.95, but it's not going to hurt you probably, but that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So, but
It,
yeah, slowly as time has gone on, we've developed, cures and,
essential oils come to mind, and I apologize to any listeners that are into essential oils, but
oils and, and
I've
there's,
I've never used any of them, so they can't be
no,
all that essential, right?
exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of these things, oh, this does this and this does that, and CBD oils and stuff like that, which I'm sure that there are some things that they do, I'm sure they moisten your skin. They probably do other things as well, but I'm not I don't know anything about that.
Yeah. So when talk a little bit about the museum and that project. Is that something that you yourself started? Were you
Yeah.
working with other people to start that? And when did that get off the ground?
I got married in 2001, and I brought Sherry out here rather than going to Cancun where she wanted to go. I brought her here to Portal, Arizona, in 2001, and she loved the area. And her dad, she worked a little bit with the state parks and stuff because her dad worked for the state parks back in Michigan, a little bit in Kansas. So she loved that we could actually be in an area that's like living in a national park. So we have waterfalls and big, beautiful cliffs and beautiful oak forests and so on. And so when we were out here, we actually bought, we learned about a piece of commercial property coming available. So we put our name in on that, and we ended up buying some other residential land at the time. And then over the course of the next 7 or 8 years, we bought land and we started developing the idea of doing a museum here. So in 2009, we actually opened the museum. So we built it. We have right now almost 600 acres on the grounds where the museum is. We've got about 30,000 square feet under roof. So we have a rattlesnake breeding facility here that we do. A lot of zoos and stuff get some of the rare things from us. We have an outdoor botanical garden where we have a lot of really rare and endangered species that breed outside. So students and school groups can come through and see that. And of course, inside we have big, beautiful gift store, a giant museum filled with art gallery, a large Apache museum. And then, of course, we have student dorms on campus, and we have some other lodging and things like that. So when we do our science meetings here, the event center, which is also part of the Apache Museum, we do science meetings here that host about 300 people typically. So we have PhDs and college students coming in from all over the world to speak and to attend our science meetings, to learn more about mostly herpetology, the stuff that we organize, but we also rent our facilities to, like we have the Malpai Borderlands Group, which is kind of a ranching conservation organization. And once a year they have their science meeting here, which will be coming up in a couple of weeks here. So we do make it available for other events other than what we organize. And we even had an event, we brought Wes Studi in from who played Geronimo in the movie. So we hired him to do a documentary on Geronimo, which turned out great. But we had him come in and we actually aired the movie Geronimo, and we had Wes Studi, talk to the audience and kind of give him some ideas of what he did, and some of the actors like Gene Hackman and Matt Damon and the people he worked with. And God, it was a great time. We said it was basically dinner and a movie with Geronimo, and
That's cool.
sold the whole place out, and it was a lot of fun. So I'd like to do more things like that because we have a state-of-the-art event center to do that. But we're so busy with so many other things, it's hard to, because it takes us almost a year to plan a big, large event like that. So
Since you do, yeah, since you do have lodging facilities on site, do you do a lot of school groups that come in, like overnight field trips kind of thing?
Yeah, we do with college students. So we have a dormitory which we can do up to 18. We have for nine women and 9 men. So we have 2 separate dorms. And then we have some outdoor, some casitas and lodging for like professors and things like that. So we typically a couple times a year, I'll have a college group come in. Our younger, like we have kindergarten groups that come in and middle school and things like that. And they just bus them in for the day. And then we'll set up different stages where they can go learn about arachnids and see animals and hold a snake, maybe touch the end of a rattlesnake or something like that. We have in a protective tube so they can get an idea of what these animals are. So it's nice seeing. And it's funny looking at when you're looking at the kindergartners, they're all like intrigued, and it's like they're like teachable. But once they're middle aged or middle schools, then they're like the guys trying to be cool, and they're trying to develop nicks and things like that. You know, whether they're already deathly afraid of the snake or they're trying to be overly cool and like, oh, this is fine. And I find it seems like it's a lot harder to get the older kids into it, as the younger kids seem to all be like intrigued and willing to hold, touch and stuff like that. So, and once they've been programmed, they're like, okay, they're 16 years old now. They're kind of already, I might be too late for them. I'm not sure.
So one of the things that fascinates me is the development of an idea to what it ends up being. Um, when you envisioned this museum initially, when you had the initial thought in your head, did it include a state-of-the-art event center and dorms and all that kind of stuff, or does that kind
Not
of?
at all. I was thinking, we actually, when we first came out here, we went to Sierra Vista, we went to Tombstone, looked at some property in Tombstone, and we hung out there for a few days, me and my wife. And I told her, I said, well, if we do a museum here, we're really like a rattlesnake museum type of thing. And at the time, I think we had about 40 species of rattlesnakes. And I said, if we do something here, we're going to have a big Burmese python or something. It's going to be a sideshow attraction. Probably be a lot more profitable than where we are now. But I wanted us to do something that was more of a peer-reviewed, scientific, something that I could be proud of, more of a legacy thing. So but when we started here, our thought was we're going to have a really cool exhibit, a nice gift store, make a nice, hopefully make some decent money, and have a nice, basically live out in the desert, in the beautiful mountains. We're at 4,100 foot elevation at the museum. We live at 4,700 foot elevation, and we're right at the foothills of the Chiricahuas, which is just a beautiful sky island here. So that was our plan. And then I've met several other people, like Gordon Schuett. Dr. Gordon Schuett is our science director, and he kind of got involved with us, 6 or 7 years ago, when we started working on the Big Rattlesnakes of Arizona book that I commissioned Tel Hicks to do all the actual portraits of. So that was probably a 7 or 8 year project. He came on board and kind of helped bring us in. We started doing more science meetings. We started doing, more books on herpetology versus just books on herpetoculture, and kind of brought us to another level. And then, of course, I built the event center because we were going to start doing science meetings. And of course, I've been collecting Apache artifacts from the locals for 10 years prior. So I'm like, well, I've got this great collection of the second, third generation stuff that I've been buying. So we made a nice exhibit out of it. We ended up, actually, a family out of Florida actually had a Geronimo's bow and arrows pre-surrender. And they were nice enough to put that on loan to us for about 5 or 6 years. And last year I was able to acquire that for the museum. So now we actually own the bow and arrows that Geronimo had pre-surrender. So
that's really cool.
The Apache Museum, and it's been fun just getting a lot of the stuff that these ranchers, kids and grandkids, inherited all this stuff, but they don't really have a lot of interest in it, and they're like going to sell it on eBay, or they're just looking for it. Well, once they found that I was interested in the stuff, I was able to buy it and preserve it for the area. So keep all the stuff right here where it was found back, 70 or 80, 100 years ago.
Kind of reminds me of the show American Pickers. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Very familiar. My wife's a fan. I like Indian motorcycles as well as they do.
Oh, there you go.
I know it well. I know it well. Yeah.
It just reminds me of that because a lot of times when they go to visit people, the story is, my collection just got so big, I had to build more buildings.
That's what
to house it.
So we have, we have a dorm. We have, of course, the event center. We have the new library, which is 5,000 square foot. We have an outbuilding that we have for our live animals off exhibit stuff. We have a big book storage building. Plus, we have 40-foot containers, and those keep acquiring those. So
you always see those shipping containers on that show too.
They work really well. So I've got 4 shipping containers here, complete. Well, actually 5, because I got a small one by our kitchen. We have a licensed kitchen here as well. So when we do events, I have a license. Basically, we're a licensed restaurant. They're only open 3 or 4 days a year. But when we do meetings, we can host and cater events for up to 300 people. So,
well, if you're ever looking to liquidate some of your stuff to make room for more, call those guys. I'm sure they'd.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh, yeah. A lot of my friends set up and do things. A lot of that stuff is staged, unfortunately. But so they come to a place like me, or they come to a place that's got these crazy collections to do a whole show that they're buying this or buying that, but they're not really, none of that's real. They're looking at stuff, but the stuff's not really for sale.
Right.
It's just like making it look just like the Pawn Stars. They're coming in with like a letter from Abraham Lincoln and all that kind of stuff. Well,
Yeah.
into a pawn shop, you realize they're selling old drills and speakers and drum sets. That's what you're going to see those. They're not bringing these things. And typically, if it's worth $1,000, they're going to give you $100 for it.
Yeah.
So that's real life for pawn shops. So a lot of these TV shows that you watch, whether it be American Pickers or it be Auction Hunters and all this kind of stuff, it's like 98% totally fake.
Right.
Entertaining.
So very entertaining for sure.
Yeah.
Another thing that I'm always interested in is when people have a business based on an interest, something that they love, finding that balance, because I'm sure you would love to be out all the time, going to Australia and here and there. But of course, you've got to be back at the ranch, so to speak,
Right.
because I'm sure running a facility like that is constant work. So how do you sort of balance the day-to-day operation of the museum, the facility, and so on with your own kind of desires to go out and find the next snake oil bottle?
Well, the nice thing about the museum, our curator, Zach Hughes, takes care of all the live animals here. So we have that. We have a manager, Michelle Simpler, that runs everything. We've got my wife, of course, runs Eco, that we have an apparel company and all that kind of stuff as well, and helps run the museum. But we have a huge staff here that does everything. So the way we have it set up, because I travel so much to different trade shows and different events around the world, I don't have any responsibilities here day to day. So day to day, everything can run whether I'm here or not. They don't even know if I'm in my office. I'm the guy that pays the bills. I'm the guy that kind of sets up like new publishing projects and work on contracts and that kind of thing. But I have nothing to do with day to day. So that way I can come and go, and I'm not required for anything, which is good.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect.
I try to hire people that are really talented, that can do things better than me, which is just about everybody. So my skill is finding people that can do great things, whether it be a great artist or a great editor or writers and things like that. And I basically just have them do it. I'm basically a conductor that can't play an instrument.
Well, this is obviously not a business podcast, but I do talk to business people and so on.
Yeah.
And the skill that you just said that you had is probably one of the most important skills that you can have when you run a business, is getting the right people around you, because no matter how good you are, if you get the wrong people around you, it really doesn't mean anything.
Well, without the right people, this museum wouldn't exist. I mean, the contractors, the construction people, the herpetologists and so on, to help make this all be and look what it is. Same with the book. The people that helped us with that book, like Bill Hayes and Kimberly Wyatt and Gordon Schuett and Chuck Smith and David Worrell, who when I asked him to do the forward in the book, and he is, whenever I've heard him talk, I'm like, my God, I'm stupid. This guy is so smart. A guy would ask a question, he'd be like, go into detail, great detail. Oh my God, and then he agreed to do it. Then I find that he was just knighted by Queen Elizabeth because of all the lives he saved in tropical countries around the world. I'm like,
wow.
So he's a knight. It's like, here's a knight just agreed to my book. I'm like, I'm so honored that all these great, amazing people that know so much about toxicology and everything else, and snakebite, were part of this book to make it what it is. Because I'm the layman. I'm not a PhD. I'm the guy that collects snakebite kits and snake oils, and I know a lot about it, but nothing compared to this. These guys eat, live, and breathe it. They just know so much.
It's so humbling when you come across someone like that is just so good at what they do and so knowledgeable that you can ask them an obscure question about something that happened back in when, and they can give you the date,
details.
They can give you everything.
Yeah, it is humbling. Yeah, it's humbling to know and be friends with a lot of these amazing people that I'm staying on their shoulders. They're the ones that've done everything.
Let's talk a little bit about the book. So how many books have you been involved in writing or publishing or both? And talk a little bit about the current project.
Well, I helped work on the Rattlesnakes of Grand Canyon, which is a book that we sell to the Grand Canyon National Park, and I've done trips down there. Did a river trip with some other friends down the canyon that are they're huge experts on rattlesnakes, and luckily we were able to find some rattlesnakes along that trip down the Grand Canyon. So that was one of the small books that I was a part of, and I helped, of course, organize the Rattlesnakes of Arizona, which was a big project, and putting everything together. Of course, Gordon Schuett was a big. He helped put basically the A-list of herpetologists that specialize in each particular rattlesnake species that was discussed in the book. He put all that together. So that book wouldn't exist without him or Tell. I mean, too big. I'm a very small part of the book, other than I made it happen. But those guys, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't be the book it is today without them. Our publishing company, Eco Publishing, we published about 40 to 45 books, mostly on herpetology and herpetoculture. And we're just starting to do some books on like the Apache Nation. We did a book on the prisoner of war camp that was just outside here in Wardsburg. We did a book with the Historical Society on a woman that wrote stories about living in the Chiricahuas back in the 1920s. And we've got some stuff coming out like the Butterfield Stage and some more historical stuff to the area, you know. And but our main focus is herpetology and always has been.
Mm-hmm. So the photographic history of snakebite treatments.
Mm-hmm.
Karen sent me on an abridged version to sample, and I loved just the old graphics, it's so visual, so visually appealing, and
Yep.
You've got to love a book like that because it has the feel of almost the feel of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just so impressed when it was a PDF, so I was just scrolling through it. So
Well,
I'm
definitely send me. I'll send you an actual copy of the book. So just give me your address at the end of the podcast, and we'll get you that taken care of. But
absolutely, that'd be amazing. But
oh yeah,
I just love scrolling through it and just when it comes to sort of historical stuff, my area is kind of music, sports, military kind of. And when I look at a book of old baseball photographs, I get that same feeling where I feel like I'm back there
I used
almost.
to collect baseball cards when I was a kid. I just wish I saved them because I'm looking at these things that are worth $70,000. I sold for $2 back in the 70s. I'm like, oh my god, what
Yeah,
it's just crazy.
or we played games up against the wall with them and beat the hell out of them.
Oh
And
my god, put them in your spokes of your bike, all kinds of stuff. So yeah,
yeah, but I
yeah,
just love the visuals of the PDF that I saw, and I'm pretty sure that was intentional in the production of the book.
showing. Tim Lawson, who helped us we did a little documentary with West Studios I mentioned earlier on Geronimo. Well, he's an incredible photographer, and he's also local resident here. And I had him come in. We set up a studio, and we photographed all our kits, professional, like with the black and the special lighting and the whole thing, and that was really a big part of it, making sure that you can actually open up a kit and see all these little intricacies, whether it be the strychnine or the little blades and the tourniquets and the things that were in there, so people could actually see that what was in there and see that, my god, these are bizarre,
Mhm.
So yeah, and that was great. That was fun to actually document our kits, and see what was actually in them. Many of them I had for years and I never even opened them. I have no idea. I mean, everything that's in them is total hokum. None of it does anything, so but it's interesting to see what they had in there. And a lot of them are based very similar. The crazy thing is you can still go to outdoor stores and camping stores today and buy a cutter snakebite kit and these different things, and they do nothing at all, zero. So, so that's
So it still
surprising.
exists to this day.
They still exist to this day.
That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So the book itself, when did it come out? Is it out? When did it come
The book
out?
came out in January. So it just came out in January this year, and we're just starting to get it out there. So it's actually we're just getting a distributors in Europe right now, and a couple in Australia, and it's on Amazon here. It's also available on our website, ecouniverse.com, and there's more and more shops and things that are carrying it. But it's an obscure, eclectic book, so you're not going to probably walk into a Borders bookshop and see it there. It's
In the
something.
pick of the week section.
Right, exactly. So you're not going to see it there, but if you can go on Amazon, you can definitely find it there.
That's pretty cool. So, what is next for you with the museum, with the facilities? Obviously, you're always bringing in new artifacts and making new displays. Are there any bigger plans down the road that you
Well,
have?
Yep, our big focus right now, we've been working on this library for about a year, and they are actually, I got construction guys out there working on it right now. They're just finishing up the drywall. They're painting the inside today, and we've got this kind of an old, like, copper British ceiling being put in. That'll go in next week, and then once we have that in, we can move the scissor lift out of there and do all the carpeting. So, and right now, all these 9-foot rosewood bookshelves I had made in India are in the middle of the hall of this big giant building. So once we start the carpeting, then we can move the bookshelves along the walls. So a lot. Right now, it's a big mess in there. But in the next 6 weeks, it's going to look like a library. It's going to be like, oh my God, it's really evolving. So it's been a big project. It's probably cost me about 80% more than I thought it was. Everything in COVID, the cement went up by 40%. Everything, paper's gone up. Shipping, everything. So
lumber, yeah,
a fortune, but it's going to be something that's been a really a big love of mine is books, and having this big beautiful library here on campus. And we've set this up as a nonprofit as well. So the way we have it set up for me and my wife, we have everything in a pour over that's going to go into our nonprofit, which will go on beyond us. So we're actually working on getting a university come in and take us over at some point. So we don't have any kids or anything. So we're planning on having this all kind of go so it can help to support the community and herpetology and the history of Native Americans and stuff out here. So
that's really cool too. When you were putting this book together, obviously, like you said, you have thousands and thousands of books. Did you use any books that you personally had or have in your own collection as inspiration for your own book? Just in terms of how it looked, the content, or was it kind of just a blank slate?
Well, it's kind of a blank. I mean, most of the books, I've got some really great books on the subject. There's a few out there, but nothing. I love reading, but I'm a picture guy, So to me, it was so important when you see some of these kits, and there's some eclectic, weird stuff in there, as you well know, and to see some of these things that were out there, and some of the information, and some of the different like little pamphlets that were in there, and some of the misinformation. I think that was the most important part of it. So to basically be able to set up this like pictured tour of this topic and kind of narrate it with a little bit of text in there to kind of let you know where this started and where it's going, So that was kind of my idea of the book. And the main reason I did this, I wasn't even thinking about doing a book, but Dr. Gordon Schuett said, you've got this great stuff, this really interesting stuff. You should do a book. And I said, all right, well, if you're going to help me with it, and he said, sure. So 2 years later, we have a book, but it was because he said, people would think this is really fascinating, weird, eclectic kind of information. So we put it together to document this collection of things that most of the stuff's getting thrown away, so it's kind of neat that we've kind of acquired it. So
is everything in the book that is pictured part of your collection, or is there some stuff in there that you haven't been able to get your hands on yet?
There's a couple things in there. I'd say about 95% of it is in our collection. There's a couple things. A friend of mine, Mike Clarkston, who's the president of International Herp Symposium, he has this really amazing thing that was developed in Nazi Germany. It's got the swastikas on it, the soaring eagles, just a bizarre thing. And God, I'd love to have that, but no, I don't have that. So there's a couple things in there. John Cann has a couple of pieces in there, like Muller's anti-venom. That was it's a snake oil basically, but it is a snake oil. But that's over in the museum in his honor over in Botany Bay in Australia. So a couple really cool pieces that are in that museum over in Botany Bay are there, and I don't have them. I wish I did, but that's it. But I'm always on the lookout. So a lot of times I won't know something exists. Once I can find it, or I know that, hey, I didn't know this exists. Now I can go look for it because I know that I can start searching the world to find it. So I found many things that I didn't even know existed a few years ago. And then I found out, well, shouldn't I can know what to look for, and then I can go and find one. So
do you have people giving you like a tip line almost, like, hey, Bob, I saw this. This is pretty cool. Do you have it?
I get that all the time. Especially now the book is out, but I get people all the time that they're retiring, or they're like, a lot of old friends in herpetology. So, hey, I've got these 7 kits I've had here. So I've probably got 70 or 80 different duplicate kits. So I use those for the people that also collect these, and I can barter. So I've got horse trading. So I'm like, okay, what do you got? I don't have that. I'll give you 2 for 1 or whatever,
Goes back to baseball cards. Got it, exactly. Need it, got it.
When I was a kid, I was buying and selling baseball cards at 9, 10 years old. I remember having Lou Gehrig and Ty Cobb and Babe Ruth and all these great cards that were like $3, $4, which was a lot of money back then. It's like Hank Aaron's, Willie Mays and all that stuff. And now I see some of the stuff. It's just like, you see what it goes for. I'm like, what? I could have literally lived under a bridge for the last 40 years and just saved my baseball cards. I think I'd be better off. It's funny to think of that.
It sure is. All right. So before we wrap up, I'm going to just give you an opportunity to point the audience to whatever it is you want to point them to: website, social media. Your book, as you said, is on Amazon and it's also on the website. So anything you want to share, feel free.
Yeah, sure. Check the book out on Amazon. It's also at ecouniverse.com, which you can see a lot of the other books that we publish on rattlesnakes and reptiles and so on. And I love it. If you guys want to come out and see the museum, we're 29 miles off of mile marker 5 in New Mexico. So we're on Highway 80, which is a loop that goes through the old Santa Fe Trail that goes through Bisbee and Tombstone, Arizona. It'll bring you back up to I-10 near Tucson, and Benson. So it's a neat place to come. Beautiful area. So anytime.
You could definitely make a vacation of that, because there's so much out there to
we have
to
a lot of
see.
animals on exhibit too that you wouldn't see anywhere else as well.
That's awesome. Well, Bob, I really appreciate your time today. I'm going to put all of your links in the episode description so people can check it all out. It's a fascinating subject that, like I said early, I didn't even know I was interested in until I got that email. But I appreciate your time, and all the best with everything moving forward.
Sounds great. A great meeting you. And send me your address. I'll send a couple books off to you.
I will do. I'll drop that in the email right now.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.